Hang in there, folks. Here we go again. Hey, wait a minute. Y'all smell something burning? Huh. Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. You can probably tell by my hairstyle that things haven't quite gone according to plan, okay? There's a reason for that. Because whenever my hair looks like this, it's usually because I've been standing around going, holy shit, how in the hell do I fix this? Well, yeah, it's going to be one of them days. Don't get me wrong, we're definitely going to be doing Ramwin Park today. We may end up starting a new playlist on the channel here at the Joe the Mountain Jedi channel because apparently there's another vehicle around here that demands more attention. It's like a needy girlfriend named Becky. Hang on, Becky, 1 minute, all right? We'll get to you here in a second. And that needy little Becky mobile, that is none other than Lil Turbie. That's right, the wife unit's land speeder, the Chevy Sonic Turbo, aka Lil Turbie, because the O's broke off. If you guys will remember, right before Christmas, I did a lot of work on this thing, including putting a new turbocharger on it. That will come into play here shortly. Let me explain. I get a call from the wife unit this morning. She's on her way to the happiest place on earth for her daily grind. And she's like, hey, there's a shitload of smoke coming out of the car. Like, a lot. I mean, a lot. I am barely functional at this point, okay? I don't have any coffee in me. I don't even think I had pants. No, I didn't have pants. So I throw some clothes on, haul ass down the road. Thankfully, she hadn't gotten on the highway yet. She's just a couple of miles up the road from home base here. And I get there, and this thing is hemorrhaging its life's blood down on the pavement. And I'm like, where in the hell is all this oil coming from? This is an example of where my frugality probably bit me square in the ass. Moral of the story is, kids, don't buy turbochargers off of eBay, okay? I'm learning this. We're all learning here. This is a learning channel. Yeah, me. I'm that guy. I'm learning. What happened, this brand new turbocharger that doesn't even have 3,000 miles on it now at this point, keep that in mind, this turbocharger failed. Not only did it failed in glorious, wondrous fashion. Apparently, Metallicor, the god of machining and mass-produced parts everywhere, decided he needed a sacrifice. He needed a blood sacrifice. And Lil Turbie decided, I volunteer as tribute. Right now, Lil Turbie is kind of wounded. The turbocharger on this thing is pumping oil at an ungodly rate into the exhaust system, and needless to say, it's killing skeeters. I'm going to view that as a positive, okay? Desperate times. Drastic times. Well, drastic times, they call for desperate measures. Whoops. That was on fire. We're good. We're good. Really? Y'all thought I was going to really do that? We love our Lil Turbie. Dysfunctional though he may be, we've grown quite fond of our four-door shitbox, even though it has its own individual quirks, and occasionally it kind of throws us for a loop and demands a little bit of attention. All in all, can't complain. It's a good car. It rides good, gets good gas mileage. Best part of it, this bitch is paid for. I will drive this motherfucker till the wheels fall off. Anyway, let's do some motorcycle shit. Okay, fat kid ran over. I feel a little better. I walked away, took a deep breath, had a juice box, and I got a cup of coffee on standby. So let's jump into Mach Cleetus here, and let's go over what we got to do to get the valve train right in this thing, okay? Now, full disclosure, before we jump into this, I've already measured the valve clearances in this motor prior to when this bike was so graciously donated to us by a channel supporter and a Patreon member. So therefore, I know where I'm at on this. Just for the sake of you guys that are watching this at home, we're going to kind of go through the motions here a little bit. I'm not going to go through the entire process just for the sake of time, but I want to give you guys the information as far as the basic steps of what you have to do and some of the ways where I do these types of jobs that's a little bit different than what the book tells you to do, but I do it for my own personal sanity and also so I can make sure that I'm covering all of my bases, okay? So let's jump into it. Look at Lil Turbie sitting there in the background, all forlorn, unloved. Well, you know what? To hell with that shit, because this ain't a car channel. This is a motorcycle channel. We're going to close the door on our shame, so to speak, right now. That way we can just, you know, set that aside and focus on what's important to us. First things first, I already drained the oil out of this thing previously, and I've already got the valve cover off. Obviously, if you guys are going to be doing a valve inspection on your motorcycle at home, you don't drain the oil first off. Leave your old oil in there, okay, at least for the time being. We'll get to that later. You do need to go ahead and get down to it to where you can get the valve cover off and you can expose the valve train. Pull the valve cover, pull your spark plugs. Yes, pull your spark plugs because you want to be able to rotate the motor over freely and a lot more easily, because you're going to have to spin this thing over at least a couple of times with a socket on a ratchet or a breaker bar or something like that. That way you can line up all your timing marks and make sure your cams are in the correct position to measure the valve clearances correctly, okay? And if you guys will remember, that's kind of what sparked off this whole saga with Mach Cleetus here, okay? Since this particular motorcycle doesn't have a inspection cover on the side of the motor to where it allows you access to the crankshaft bolt, we have to take the timing cover off the side of it because that's where our timing marks and also where the bolt that you roll the motor over by the crankshaft is. Set tight, let's do that real fast. That way we can get down to the get down and get down to what we need to see and what we need to be able to put a socket on where we can turn the motor over, okay? Okay, now I want to show you guys something here real quick. Bear with me, we're going to be doing a little bit of talking hand stuff, but not a whole lot, all right? So don't go, oh God, more of this again. Whenever you're doing stuff like this, like in this case where we've got to pull the timer cover off the side of the motor to be able to access the crankshaft bolt and the timing marks, it's a good idea to get you a small pan that you can put underneath there where you can catch oil, because you are going to lose a little bit. Not a whole lot, maybe a cup or so, okay? Just to give you fair warning, don't use the cast iron heirloom stuff that Granddaddy Thibodeau handed down to you, you know, from back in the 1900s, because I'll tell you right now, that ain't what she'd want, and your cornbread ain't never going to taste right after that, okay? Don't be a tightwad. Go to Wally World. Get some of these cheap baking pans, okay? These things are $3-4 a piece. This is kind of a medium-sized one that I use. I got a small one, and then I got a big one that holds about 2 gallons of oil or coolant or whatever. Makes for a hell of a good drain pan, and also you don't have to worry about it getting all bendy and floppy if it's full of hot oil on you and you're trying to pour it into a bucket. That way you don't accidentally baptize your shoes. So we're going to whip this timing cover off real quick. Good old Walmart Hyper Tough cordless stuff. Lay these little guys right here. Oh, got a little bit of water in there. Maybe I shouldn't have left it outside in the rain the other night. Shame on me. So that being said, I'm going to have to pull the drain plug on this thing again because, unfortunately, I got a little bit of rainwater in the bottom end of Mach Cleetus here. Yeah, I know that's bad, and the thing is, that's my fault. I shouldn't have done that. Bad. Bad human. Bad. All right. Now, considering this is a performance motorcycle from years gone by, there's always a possibility that somebody's put an aftermarket ignition advancer or an aftermarket timing plate in this motor. Even if it's stock and you know it's stock, this is one of those things where the whole idea of trust but verify comes into play, okay? So, as we all know, on inline 4-cylinder motors, cylinder number 1 is referenced as the one on the left-hand side when you're sitting with your butt planted on the bike. Now, there's going to be timing marks down here on this timing plate that match up with an indicator mark here on the case that shows where you're at top dead center. Now, that's where you need to check your valve clearance and also correct your valve clearance at, just as a sanity check and also just to make sure that it's not a built-on Monday scenario. What I like to do is I'll take a pick. I'm hesitant to use wood, and I strongly recommend you don't, because if it gets caught on something, it can break and it can fall down in the cylinder. But anyway, you want something that's going to be long enough that you can put down in the spark plug hole to where you can not only see when the piston is coming up, you can also grab it and you can feel to verify that your motor is truly at top dead center when your timing mark says it is, okay? Don't be afraid to roll that thing around a couple of times just to make double sure and get a feel for it. Okay, so we're on the piston right there. Yep, piston's trying to travel down. So let's go back just a little bit. And it's going to be a little reluctant to turn backwards because you're getting caught by the starter drive clutch. Don't be afraid of it. Just don't gronk on it and, you know, go full-blown yeehaw Leroy Jenkins whenever you're twisting on the crank bolt. But ease it up slow. That way you can feel for when the piston's coming up and it's at top dead center. And then, I know you guys ain't gonna be able to see it on the camera, but I've got this nifty little mark on the timing plate right here that shows T. It denotes cylinders 1 and 4 because keep in mind, cylinders 1 and 4, they will be at top dead center at the exact same time. Only cylinder 1 will be on the compression stroke. Cylinder 4 is going to be on its exhaust stroke because math and stuff. It's a 4-cylinder motor. There's 360 degrees in a circle. It's on a 720-degree firing rotation, and the crankshaft's got to turn around twice to complete one full firing cycle. Then we've got to multiply that by 4. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a dance. But anyway, our timing mark here is lined up with our timing mark as a reference on the crankcase here. So we know our timing marks are accurate. That's the main thing. Now, let's look at our cams. Yep. The cam lobes are pointing this way and this way. So we know we're at true top dead center on the compression stroke. That's where you want to measure your valve clearance at. Okay, so we verified that we're at true actual top dead center on the compression stroke for cylinder number 1, which is this guy right here. Now, I've already measured to see what clearance I have currently, and I've got that written down, and I've got it written on this handy little check sheet that I print out, and this is what I use for jobs at work, but I also use it for stuff here at the house because don't depend on the noodle, okay? Whenever you got 16 of these little guys you got to keep up with, or 20 if you're a Yamaha Genesis motor fan, or worse, 24 if you're a Honda CBX guy, because math, 5 times 4 is 20, 4 times 6 is 24. Yeah. And we're not even going to touch on you Ducatista boys, okay? You Ducati guys, you guys are a different breed. While I service Ducati stuff, and I'm very familiar with the Ducati Dismo valve train, it ain't no fun. And yeah, they're cool and all, but man, sometimes it sucks having to set valves on one of them damn things. So yeah, we're talking plain Jane, run-of-the-mill Japanese stuff here, guys. This is the sheet that I was talking about, okay? And I'll have you guys a link down here in the comments to where y'all can print one of these for your own records and keep it on file. Usually I print off 10 or 20 at a whack because I use them all the time at work. Where these come in handy is, if you notice, it's got locations for each individual cylinder, and also up here where the valves themselves are marked out, it has area for your measured clearance, what you currently have, what number shim, if any, is in there, and what size shim that you replaced it with to get the correct amount of clearance. And usually what I'll do is I'll write my specs as far as, you know, what measurement I'm shooting for up here at the top, you know, by the exhaust, and down here below by the intake section. That way I've got a quick reference to go by. And then also for all you nerdy OCD uber organized types, obviously not me here, but for those kind of guys, you've got this down here to where you can fill out your vehicle information. Year, make, model, mileage, date, yada, yada, yada. Put any notes down there, okay? It's a good thing to have, and especially if this is your particular bike and you plan on keeping it for a while, hey, you got records that go back to whenever you started working on this thing. Now, one special tool that you are going to have for doing this, you're going to need a set of feeler gauges, okay? And they need to be graduated in thousandths of an inch or hundredths of a millimeter, depending on what your preference is and also where you're located at geographically. Here in the good old US of A, we use the imperial measurement system. Even though a lot of our measurements are spec'd out in metric, I still prefer to use imperial on stuff like this just because it makes it simpler for me to keep it together in my brain, okay? Whichever you use, just get you a set of feeler gauges, and don't get the real big and huge ones, okay? These are about, 3.5 inches long, something like that. But one thing that I like about these is they have this little bit of a taper out towards the tip, and that makes it a little easier to get in and around all the, all the stuff that's goings on underneath the valve cover, to where you can get down to measure what you need to measure, but you're not having to fight to get it in there, and you're not accidentally dragging it across something else to where you may get a false reading from it, okay? Now, I have my sheet from when I did the initial inspection on the valve train on this bike before it was donated to us, so I know what these valves are already measuring out at. But just to give you guys an example at home, I'm going to go ahead and measure the valves here on number 1 cylinder, and then compare it to our manufacturer spec and show you what we need to do to swap that around, okay? Set tight here. Okay, so on the exhaust side of the head, our spec is from 7/1000 of an inch to 9/1000 of an inch. They give you that tolerance in there. Now, me personally, I always try to set my valves towards the maximum end of the tolerance, because number one, that's going to allow the valve, and in this case the rocker arm, to run cooler, because you've got more clearance for oil to flow around that. A cooler valve is a happy valve, okay? Now, when that clearance is tightened up, especially when the clearances are excessively tight, that's going to make the cams, lifter buckets, the valve tips themselves, that'll make them run slightly hotter, and it's also going to accelerate the wear on it. So you can kind of see it's a compounding problem. As the wear starts, the wear will gradually increase at a faster rate, because you've got less clearance for lubricating oil to flow through there to not only lubricate the valve and the camshaft, but it helps cool those parts, all right? So you want to make sure that you're within your spec. Also, if you set your clearances towards the big end of the tolerance, that just gives you that much more time before you got to dive back in here and do the job again. So if we're looking for 7 to 9 on the exhaust, let's take a 9/1000 inch feeler gauge, because that's our maximum clearance. Let's start out with that and see where we are, okay? Uno momento, por favor, while I beseech beloved wife unit for some slight camera assistance. All right, gang, this is the dreaded talking hand part of the video that I was talking to you about. But where these guys messed up whenever they built the head on this is they measured the valve clearance between the camshaft itself and the lash pad on the rocker arm. Now, my spec is 9/1000 of an inch. That's what I'm looking for. And that 9/1000 of an inch feeler gauge, it fits in there beautiful. It's got just a slight noticeable amount of drag. And here, let me get my microphone over here and maybe you can hear this. Hear that little squeaky? Well, that is typically the correct amount of drag that you want to have whenever you're doing a job like this. You won't always hear it, but it's a good indicator. The problem is 9/1000 of an inch here, and you guys can see that's a 9/1000 of an inch feeler gauge. See, 0.009. Whenever you measure it in the correct spot, which is between the tip of the rocker arm here and the shim on top of the valve, well, there's 12 thousandths. Let's see how much more we can get out of it. Any bets on 15? If 15 will go? No, not quite. But let's see where we are. Let's drop it down to 13. Yep, 13 goes. So let's see if 14 goes. Yep, 14 goes. And you can see right there, 0.014 inch. That's 14 thousandths of an inch. Just for a sanity check, let's try that 15 thousandths inch gauge again and see. Nope. 15 don't go. So 14 thou it is. Our spec on these valves is from 7 to 9 thousandths of an inch. So you can see by measuring the valve clearance at the wrong spot, we grew 5, flirting with 6 thousandths of an inch of clearance that shouldn't be there. Now, this motor was noisy when I had it running. It didn't run well, but I could tell it wasn't happy. This is why. They measured it in the wrong spot, okay? This is why it pays to read through the procedure in your service manual. Do it a couple of times if it looks a little bit wonky to you. That way you got it all programmed in your brain and you don't make the mistake that these guys made, because every single valve in this head is exceptionally loose. We've got a lot of shims we've got to swap out in this thing. Here, I'm going to show you how you do that. Okay, now if you guys remember when I was showing you the other night, these rocker arms will slide off to the side because they've got a location spring on the shaft that they pivot on. So what we're going to do, we are going to take our pick, and we might need to give it a helping finger. This may come in handy for date night too. What do you think, babe? But we're going to slide that off to the side and let it pivot down just a bit. That way it catches the side of the valve spring retainer and it holds that rocker. Like I said, we're going to slide it to the side, but we're going to slide him to the side like that to where it catches the side of the valve spring retainer. That way it holds that rocker arm out of our way and we can get to our shim. You can take a pick and you can pop that shim up out of there, but there's a damn good chance that it's going to drop down into one of the cavities in the head. So that's where the good old magnet on a stick comes in handy.
There.
And there he is right there. That's the adjusting shim. Let me grab this. I want to point out a couple things to you guys. Okay. Now this adjusting shim, you can see this polished up spot here in the middle of it where it was laying on the valve tip itself. There's actually no wear there. It's just polished up slightly. And if we flip it over on the other side, you can see where they had some markings etched in here. That's for the size of what thickness this shim is. Now don't be surprised if you can't read all of it like we can on these, because you're going to get a little bit of wear from the tip of the rocker arm on there, and that etching is going to get abraded away. Again, there's no actual wear on the shim itself. It's smooth as can be, and the reason why, these are tool grade hardened steel. They hardly ever wear any at all. So it's perfectly fine to reuse these things. If you need to swap this guy over to his neighbor to come up with the right clearances, that's totally fine. But we need to measure this and see what thickness it is first. That way we can figure out where we're starting from and where we need to be at. All right, so the only special tool that we need here outside of our feeler gauges and our trusty magnet on a stick, we need a set of calipers. And they don't have to be fancy digital calipers like these, and this is Harbor Freight fancy, so they ain't that damn fancy. But you need a set of dial calipers or a set of digital calipers that are repeatable that will measure in your unit of measure of choice, be it thousandth of an inch or in metric. In this case, we're measuring thousandth of an inch. One thing that I always do is I'll open the jaws up and I'll wipe the jaws off just to make sure there's not a little piece of grit or something there that's going to throw off my reading. And then check them just to make sure they're zeroed out. Now, take your shim and using the knife edge of your calipers, because this is where it is important to measure off of, that comes out as 0.0925. That's 92.5 thousandths of an inch. But we got this magic button on the digital calipers, and this makes it a lot easier for me, and it probably will for you guys too. You hit that button right there, and boom, it automatically does the conversion for you. So we just converted our 95 thousandths of an inch over to 2.34 millimeters. That tells us that before the numbers got worn away on this shim, this was a 2.30 millimeter thick shim. Now we need to make up 5 thousandths of an inch, and I'll show you a quick and dirty way you can do that. Take your caliper, you're reading 2.34 millimeter, kick it back over to inches, and we're measuring 0.092. Okay, so let's add 5 thousandths of an inch, because in this case we got to get thicker to close up some of that clearance. So we're going to set our caliper at 0.98, or 0.098 rather, and then hit your button to convert it again. Looky there, 2.48 millimeter. Well, guess what, kids? 0.02 of a millimeter, that's going to work out to roughly about 0.5 thousandth of an inch there. It's not that big of a jump, so let's round this up. We're going to call that 2.50. And let's dig a 2.50 shim out of our shim kit here. Yep, 2.50 right there, bang on. And just for a sanity check, let's kick it back over to Imperial. Looky there, 98 thousandths of an inch, right where we want to be. Cool. All right, gang. This is where the check chart comes in handy, because here's my existing shim that I took out, 0.092 thousandths of an inch, or 2.34 millimeter. And here E means existing. So we write what our existing shim thickness was here, and then just as a sanity check, after we do our math and figure out what shim we need to replace it with, we're going to write that here. That way you know what it needs and also what you put in there. Now this is for the right-hand exhaust valve on cylinder number 1. Getting these shims back in, it can be a little bit fiddly, but it really doesn't matter whether you turn the letters up or down on the size of it. Generally, I try to turn the numbers up. That way they're not going to get worn away and I'll be able to see them later on. All right, guys, now this is the fiddly part. Keep your super duper magnet on a stick on standby, because if you drop this thing, you're going to have to be able to fish the thing out of there. But we got to get that shim back in its little pocket on top of the valve spring retainer. That way we can reinstall our rocker arm. So what we're going to do is we're going to raid the wife unit's medicine cabinet, and we're going to abscond with a pair of her tweezers. And the reason we're doing that is because I got big chonkster fingers and I have a hard time getting down in there. So here's what we're doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our shim with our tweezers, and then we're going to very gently set that little guy down there on top of the valve spring retainer, and we're going to use our pick to push it in place. And this is a very close tolerance fit on these, so you've got to make sure that you've got it put in there flat and level, or else it's not going to lay down like it's supposed to. Now here's the thing. These shims have got to set in there straight and square, because if they don't, whenever you put the valve train back together, it's not going to let the valve seat all the way, or worse. I mean, yeah, that could cause you to have a misfire and it may rattle and make some noise. The bad part is if you start the motor up and you've got one of those shims cockeyed like that, it can try to rock the valve spring retainer enough to where it can spit the keepers off of it, and guess what? That's when bad things happen, because the motor tries to eat the valve. Make sure you got your shims installed correctly. I'm wondering if there's a burr on this spring retainer from when they did the headwork on this thing at the machine shop, because that shim does not want to go in place where it's supposed to go. There, all better. Pro tip here, bumpkin tip if you will. Sometimes if you got a shim that's being a little snug in the retainer like this one was, it's okay to give it some very gentle taps and encouragement to get it to find its home where it wants to live at. But make sure you use a piece of brass rod. In this case, I got a piece of brass tubing that I just happened to pick up from the bench over there. The main reason why you want to use brass, it's softer than the steel. It's not going to tear anything up. Also, it's not magnetic. It's not going to try to grab a hold of that shim and pick it up out of where you're trying to put it into, okay? Be very careful if you have to do this, okay? Don't go Hulk smash, all right? This ain't that time, guys. Time for a little bit of finesse. Speaking of Hulk smash. Okay, in the essence of Hulk smash, I thought it only fitting that I bust out the shirt that my friend Mona made me. I love this thing. Truly, I do. Everybody laughs their ass off when they see this thing, and honestly, she's a very talented designer and extremely talented artist. Mona, thank you. That was probably the best damn Christmas present I've had in a long time. Every now and then, you just got to bust out your little pecker and just get to swinging it. All right, so now that we've got our shim in place in the retainer and we know it's going to lay in the way it's supposed to and stay put, all we got to do is we got to slide the rocker arm back over and make sure the rocker slides back on top of the shim clean and clear. Kind of like that. Right like that. Satisfying click for all the ASMR types out there. Great success. But what we're going to do before we move on to his neighbor, trust but verify, guys. Check your math. Throw a feeler gauge back in that thing and see where you are now. So we were at 14 thousandths before, which was way huge. Our spec is from 7 to 9 thousandths. So let's grab the old number 9 here. See if we can get him in there. Yeah, I can, but it's awful snug. Let's try an 8. Money shot. 8 thousandths it is. It's actually a little skosh bit on the loose side at 8 thousandths. So we're right there in that sweet spot where I want to be on the big end of the scale, okay? But as you can see, 8 thousandths of an inch feeler gauge. She slides in there just fine. Now all we got to do is do this 15 more times for the rest of the valves in the head. And this video is already getting kind of long here, so I'm going to do this off camera. However, this will give you guys a general overview of how the steps in the process work, okay? Let's kind of dumb this down and make it simple here. Let's walk through the steps here, guys. First, you measure. See where you are to begin with. R, see what it measures out at. Yeah, I went to school in Arkansas, y'all. Give me a break, okay? Mama, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I tried. But you measured, see what your existing clearance is. Then you do whatever you have to do to adjust that clearance. In this case, we've got to move the rocker arms aside and pull the shims out. Other bikes, they may have a screw and lock nut affair that's very simple. You can just screw that adjuster screw in and out to set your clearance. Other bikes, hey guys, sorry. If you got to pull the cams out, ain't no easy way around it. You got to pull the cams out. It's not as bad as what it sounds, trust me. But measure to find your existing, disassemble or adjust, whatever your applicable method may be. In this case, we had to pull the shim out to measure it and see where we were starting from. Then check your math to see what shim you have to replace it with, or in the case of a threaded adjuster, what you have to adjust that adjuster to get to the correct clearance. Reassemble. Then, before you move on to the next one, always verify your measurement. Check it, make sure it's where you expect it to be, make sure it's where it's supposed to be. That's the big thing. Consistency is key. And this is a little fiddly, and the first time or two that you do it, you may kind of get buffaloed and you may think, God almighty, this takes forever to do. Well, yeah, because you're in an unfamiliar environment, you're doing something that you ain't ever done before, most likely. Trust me, after you do it a few times, it becomes second nature and you don't even think about it. And that gives you a pretty rough idea of how you go about checking, inspecting, adjusting, and verifying the valve clearances in your motor. Now, obviously, not all motors are going to adjust their valves in this manner. Some motors have hydraulic lifters, like my Roadstar, a lot of Honda models, various other models from Kawasaki, Suzuki, and Yamaha. They all use hydraulic lifters or hydraulic lash adjusters in certain applications. Research your particular bike and see what you got. That way you know what to expect. Now, the beauty of hydraulic stuff, you don't have to do this job because they adjust themselves. Unfortunately, it's not widely used. So most of you guys, guess what? Every now and then, you're going to have to bust out the feeler gauges, whether you like it or not. Now, like I said, I've only got to do this 15 more times, but trust me, it actually does go a whole hell of a lot quicker whenever I'm not having to figure out how to point a camera there and show you guys what I'm doing. I just jump in and I do it because, yeah, I've done it a few times. Since this video is already getting a little bit long and we're already under a time crunch because of all the fuckery that happened with Lil Turbie today, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. But I do want to take just a couple of minutes to remind you guys, hey, go check out the Patreon site, okay? Patreon is how you gain access to the Joe the Mountain Jedi Discord. We're adding members over there every day. We are growing the knowledge base there at the Discord every day. We have people over there. Honestly, we have some people over there that are quite brilliant in their own respects and in their own areas. And then you got, you know, doofuses like me that just usually make a bunch of inappropriate jokes and, you know, do stupid shit on YouTube occasionally. It's worth it because the knowledge itself, it's invaluable. The network that we're building over there, that's invaluable because if I'm not around, I got plenty of people over there that are more than willing to jump in and help people out however they possibly can, okay? Not only that, if you're out and about, you have a breakdown, or if you're just jammed up and you can't figure out what in the hell you need to do, put out the call, put up the flag, throw out the bat signal, if you will. There's going to be somebody in your area that will most likely be able to help talk you through it. Or, if you bribe them with a generous donation of cheap pizza and lowbrow beer, they may even come over and give you a hand. I mean, hey, I've done it before, and the thing is, I ain't the only one. There's plenty of them out there. Come join us. Come learn with us. Let's grow that knowledge base, okay? Let's grow that network of people willing to help people simply for the fact that we're here for one thing and one thing alone. We're here because of motorcycles. We're here because we want to know about motorcycles. We want to learn about motorcycles. And also, let's figure out how we can do this on our own to where we're not at the mercy of a shop or a dealership or at the almighty credit card, okay? I would much rather spend a couple of hours in the shop versus spending a couple of $100 on a repair bill. That way, that's money in my pocket. And that kind of shows through with Lil Turbie here, because I don't want to pay somebody to do that job. I don't want to do that job, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper for me to do that job than it is the guy down the road. That, and also since I have the dearly beloved wife unit who is the light of my eye and the center of my world in that vehicle 99.6% of the time, there's very few people, and I mean damn few people, that I trust to work on her vehicle, something that she's in. So I am my own quality control. Love you, baby. Oh. Just remember, till we get back together on this thing next time, because don't forget, y'all, we still got to fix the cam timing in this bike. I wanted to break this up because dealing with the cam timing is going to be a whole different animal than dealing with the valve clearances in this thing. They're right there next to one another, but it's two separate worlds, okay? So that video is going to be coming up here next week, right here on the Joe the Mountain Jedi channel. We're going to get the cam squared away in this thing. We're going to get it buttoned up. That way, hey, we got carburetors we got to do on this thing. Maybe we can do something with that between now and then, and, who knows? This thing may be on the road a hell of a lot sooner than what we think. Just remember, guys, I appreciate each and every single one of y'all that shows up week after week for our premieres. I appreciate you guys that come over and hang out with us on the Patreon site. You Patreon members that have elected to support our little endeavor here to be able to purchase these motorcycles and these products and the parts for these motorcycles to put them back on the road where they belong. I have no words to express the amount of gratitude that I have for that, because y'all have faith in me to be able to show you the way, so to speak. That's the way somebody put it to me a long time ago. Me personally, I thought, well, you know what, a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. But then again, I've done this shit for a while, and for some strange reason, people think I know what I'm doing. Now, I don't know everything about everything, but I know a fair piece about what I know about. And I'm more than happy to share that with you every single day, and it doesn't cost you one damn plug nickel, okay? Knowledge is free. Information is free. But the biggest thing is, knowledge that goes unshared, that is knowledge lost. That's why I encourage people, please come to the Patreon site. You don't have to spend one plug nickel, but that's how you get into the Discord. The Discord is where we are building our knowledge base. That's where we are building our brain trust and our knowledge library. Come learn with us. It's a hell of a fun time. And we're not serious and, all kind of, all the time anyway. We actually joke around and have a hell of a lot of fun over there too. And, we've been known occasionally to maybe throw up the occasional questionable or somewhat suggestive meme, picture, story time, things like that. So, yeah, it's a hell of a good time, even if you just want to blow off some steam after you've had a shitty day at work. Just remember, y'all, I love you, I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you guys back here next week, okay? Till then, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Force will be with you, always.